Welcome to today's edition of our AML's Municipal Monday. These take the place of our regularly annually occurring legislative conference that would have been here in Juneau this February. But with these communications, we want to update our members and public officials about issues that matter to local governments. And while we focused so far with these Municipal Mondays on the legislative session here in Juneau, I want to turn our attention to DC and the deliberations by Congress on an additional relief package. And specifically, I want to speak to Senator Sullivan. I know that the House has passed this $1.9 trillion relief package just over the weekend. And then it now comes to the Senate. And AML has talked already with Senator Murkowski about the need for state and local relief. But Senator Sullivan, I want to maybe talk just a little bit about why this is important to Alaska and why it's important to local governments. And for our members, I hope that you'll reach out to our congressional delegation and talk through why federal relief is so important to local governments. Listen, we're a year into this pandemic. Last July, after the CARES Act funds had gone out, we said that CARES Act funding would not be enough to cover Alaska's needs. CARES Act funding came with a lot of restrictions, including for it not to be used for lost revenue. Some argued then that we needed more time and flexibility. We agreed. Back in July, we needed more flexibility and time. And the reality has been that Congress is often behind in its relief, always looking over its shoulder and never at what's coming. And we know that when relief got approved, even with the CARES Act package, it took months to implement, and it takes months to feel the impact. And that timing issue is really important in terms of how we consider additional federal relief. But nothing really happened with the urge to address the time and flexibility issue. In the Consolidated Budget Act of 2021, an extension of CARES Act funding was included. And with a week out from the original deadline, that deadline was extended. It was an effort that we're glad for, but that for many communities came without relief. It was too little a measure and too late. There was an effort just prior to that to negotiate a package for state and local government relief, but ultimately that effort failed and wasn't included in the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. Now, what's in front of us? Some argue that this latest effort is too much at $1.9 trillion. So many have argued that if it passes, this will be $6 trillion that the federal government has put into federal relief. But looking back over this last year at the $4 trillion that have already gone out, we know that it's helped to stem the losses. It's helped to avoid business closures, and it's helped local governments and states maneuver through and adequately respond to COVID-19 and the economic crisis. But we can't just look backward. We have to look forward to where we're at. And I know for Alaska, local governments haven't been made whole through that past relief. Two, many local governments have faced really extreme cases of lost revenue, 40% for some communities, 60% for some communities. ADAC, Fort Yukon, 80 to 90% for Denali Borough and Municipality of Skagway. There's actually a wide range of losses for Alaska's local governments that haven't been addressed through $4 trillion in federal aid. And this new package at $1.9 trillion, a third then of what will have come from the federal government, still is a lot, and in some ways not enough for Alaska's communities. We argue that what's in there is too little, actually. For some Alaska communities, the allocation is less than 10% of what they've lost. Now, some in this current debate will argue that there is still CARES Act funding out there. For Alaska's local governments, 90% of their CARES Act funds have been expended. And the only reason that's not a higher number has been because of that deadline expansion with just a week to go back in December. We know that Alaska's local governments could fully account for 100% of their CARES Act funding, but many have chosen to delay that reporting. Some argue that not enough has been lost by states, or that they've rebounded, or that they have reserves. And any argument that state reserves or local government reserves should be used during this period fails to take into account that we need state and local governments to be healthy to be able to help with economic recovery. And yes, some states have bounced back. What we want, though, are states and local governments that have the resources necessary to respond to the continuing needs of the public health crisis, of the economic crisis, and today to America's recovery. Their spending down from reserves does not position them well for recovery efforts, and the role of federal relief is to provide resources that can be expended to meet the needs of Americans. This isn't a bailout. At this point, we need to fill the gaps and position the nation to be on the other side of this crisis. We encourage you, Senator, to look ahead at the challenges that remain and support this effort to help us address them. Some may call this a one-sided partisan relief package. We encourage you to reach across the aisle. AML is a nonpartisan organization. Our members are nonpartisan in their function. We understand bipartisanship, and it really does at the local level mean working together on compromises, on alternatives, on proposals that get to the point, and in this case, that advance state and local relief. If there are other options in front of us, let's hear those. But right now, $350 billion of that aid package is dedicated to state and local governments. And this is the option that we have in front of us, and at this point that we support. Some may say that this bill isn't targeted relief, but I would argue that one of the benefits of sending federal relief to state and local governments is that they can fine-tune it to be targeted, and state and local governments can more effectively target these funds to meet their needs, and more importantly, the needs of residents and businesses. Finally, some may note that not enough is going to vaccine efforts or public health within this bill. But it's worth noting that state and local governments have been at the forefront of this process. Federal aid to local governments contributes to the public health needs of this nation. Ultimately, Senator Sullivan, please vote with local governments in Alaska. Local governments in Alaska that have seen lost revenue of up to 90% of their budget. Local governments in Alaska, many of whom are struggling right now and who need this support. Together, let's look forward to the other side of this pandemic, where states and local governments can stand steadily and help lead America's recovery. We know that for Alaska, this can't happen quickly enough. Thank you, Senator Sullivan, for your attention. Thank you to AML members who can reinforce this message and get this message not just to your bodies, but to amplify this message so that all of our congressional delegation understands what's at stake with this next relief package. We know that a more informed Alaska will be an Alaska that benefits from good policy, and that local governments will be doing their part. Thank you.